Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Karen Herold, principal at Studio K in Chicago. Thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I always like starting out my podcast with my loaded question. And if you mind introducing yourself to let my audience know a little bit more about your experience and journey so far in career and education.
Sure. I was born in Holland, in a small town not far from Amsterdam, and studied there actually in fashion. And after my studies, I worked there for a few years and ended up in Chicago in 1998. At that point, I was convinced that fashion wasn't my route to go, and I was really interested in interiors. And I found my way into interiors through many different jobs, starting with babysitting and then house painting. And then I worked in a resource library of an architectural firm downtown. And one thing led to the next, and finally led to me owning my own company about 10 years ago now.
So what led you to come over to the States in general?
A guy. No. I ended up getting married here, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do at that point. I knew I didn't want to do fashion anymore, and I wanted to make a change. And it's very normal in Europe to take a year off and figure out what you want to do after college. I didn't, because I started working right away. And so I thought that was the year for me to try to figure that out. And Chicago was just one of many planned stops. I was supposed to only stay for 2 weeks. And that ended up in 25 years. So
a very long 2 weeks.
That got out of hand.
So what do people do when they take a year off? Are they like jumping around to different spots to get like almost intern experience, or?
Yeah, I think my nieces and nephews are all doing it now. Many do it right after school, and they do like, they go somewhere to learn a language, and then they help out. They work in the fields, or they work at orphanages, or they help in, less fortunate areas of the world, and then get their language skills that way. And then they do some traveling, backpacking, going in hostels. One of them actually did work as a nurse practitioner somewhere. So I think a lot of people just kind of take a year and then mix some of that, what they want to do, with some language skills, and then, sure, have some fun in between as well.
Yeah. No, and I know my dad's side all grew up in Europe. And so was my great-grandfather. He took a year off of school, and I've only ever heard that through his stories. And he actually collected small traveler spoons. Mm-hmm. And his uncle would meet him in all these different cities, and he would have to report out on the culture of the city, the language of the people, how the people function and operate day to day, and how all these different cultures are different. So now I end up collecting spoons because I thought that story was fascinating, but I haven't heard it from a modern standpoint of individuals traveling after their education before jumping
I
into a
actually
career?
think it's really smart. I tried my son to do it, but he was very eager to start working. I think it's just good to just become older, especially people who don't know exactly what they're doing. Just get life experiences and figure it out just while you go instead of sitting in your house
Yeah.
and figuring it out. I just think getting out there brings you to many different places and therefore different opportunities.
Yeah, not just grinding away immediately.
Exactly. There's a whole life to work, so
Exactly.
might as well wait for that a little bit.
Yeah. So I know before we jump into your studio, I want to kind of step back for your fashion education. And how has your fashion education and experience influenced your interior design today?
It still influences every day. A lot of times, actually, really literally, we will take a fashion image or a fashion icon and we will turn that into the inspiration for a interior space, which is really great because there's so many elements you can take out of an image like that, and color palettes and textures and overall mood and vibe and the energy levels, and you can take all that and turn that into a mood board that fits with that for an interior space. We actually do that as a little class many times with people that we mentor, where we let people pull palettes for an interior all based of a fashion image. And it's interesting, like anyone can do it. Like it always works, it always looks great. And so we do that in our studio quite a bit, which allows you to not copy what any other else would have done. Because many times when people start with inspiration image of existing spaces, it's just really hard to not know that anymore, right? You've seen it, you're inspired by it. And so the idea of going back to a fashion or any kind of iconic image and use that as a starting point means that all of the ideas come out of your own head and aren't a copy of something that someone else has already done.
Yeah, because anytime I did like precedent studies in architecture school, it was always looking at other buildings or other projects, and you can't get a lot of that out of your head. So you almost end up just mashing it together, but trying to keep with the concept.
Yeah, and the thing is also you're not really starting from the beginning, right? Because those people who designed those things, they had something in mind, hopefully. And so if you keep going back to the core of where the inspiration comes from, and that's where you start, then you can actually start creating something instead of reassembling existing ideas. So it gives a really great blank canvas almost to then start jumping off from there. And I've noticed that clients really like it a lot. Because if that iconic fashion image we choose obviously links to the project we're working on, clients really connect with that. I remember when we did Nobu Hotel, I was really interested in designing a hotel that didn't fall back on the cliche things that you think is Japanese stemming from a Western culture. And I always said to the team, like, if someone would build a Dutch hotel, I hope it won't have a windmill or wooden shoes or cheese. But what you could do is go back to what are typical ways of how people live in Holland or what are characteristics of Dutch people, and then use that and start building from that. And we did the same for Nobu Hotel and started with Japanese design principles, linked those to fashion images, and then start building from there.
So did you go back to like their more history fashion, or were you looking at like more modern fashion?
Contemporary fashion, yeah, current fashion, but also there's like a lot of ideas in how they work with indigo, and there's just such an amazing textual ideas in there, in the way they stitch patterns on top of each other. So there's so much layering there that you can then take and turn that into interiors, and color palettes are very obvious, but also just ways of working with proportions and ways of working with the removal of things and creating on purpose empty spaces. So there's a lot of things in how Japanese people design, and that you can use to then design from, instead of looking at existing Japanese restaurants.
Yeah. And it just kind of stitches, not to make it a pun, but stitches it
Yeah,
all together.
yeah, exactly.
And so I know you had experience in architecture firms on the library side. Were you also helping do interior work as well? Because I know
No, it was
back
only
then
like,
it was like strict library
yeah, I
positions.
was strict library position. I had no experience. I spoke the language kind of, sort of, but I always said I spoke MTV English. So that's most of my English came from that. And so these people gave me an opportunity, which I am still to this day extremely grateful for. But it was $10 an hour, 30 hours a week, and pretty much sort and file. And then I would meet with sales reps who would come drop off carpet samples.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they would allow me to like pull a palette of fabrics for if they had a presentation. But it was a very different type of company. It was a company that focused on laboratories and healthcare. So it was far from kind of the stuff we're doing now.
Yeah. So jumping into Studio K a bit, what was that process like for you deciding to step in and create your own firm?
Well, it was kind of a long time coming. I'd worked for this incredible firm called 555 for 13 years, or let's call it 12 years when I decided. And it was around that time in my personal life that I felt I was ready to start making a move. And the company that I worked with for, they also create many of the things that we would design. And so the manufacturing part was a very important part in the company, truly the most important part. And design was added to that. I helped build that design studio, and I would hire everyone and work with everyone. And many times I would have relationship with our clients during that design process. And then the other side of the company would produce many of the items that we would design for the full interiors. And as it goes in manufacturing, many times there's issues, like something is a little bit too long or something's a little bit too short, or, the finish might not be exactly as expected. And that would create friction with those clients. And for me, that was really hard because it just wasn't my focus, and it's not something that I wanted to focus on. And I felt it was very distracting from that, what I wanted to focus on. It took a lot of time. And so for me, part of leaving that company, besides that I also felt it was time to run my own thing, was also that I really wanted to strictly focus on design and not on the manufacturing side. So when I started Studio K, 555 would still produce a lot of our work, but we wouldn't have anything to do with it anymore. And I didn't have to guarantee it or work through that with the client. So I could really focus on just that part that I enjoy so much, which is the creativity of it all.
Yeah. And I think I read that you started your firm with a team rather than solo. I know most people start out solo and start to build up the team. So how was that starting out as a team?
So I was really lucky because when I decided to do this was a year prior to me leaving. So I gave my boss 1 year notice, which I don't think that's something a lot of people do. But I knew that the company, for 13 years, I had ran that division. So I knew there was going to be a hefty impact. I wanted to give my boss, who's still a close friend of mine, the chance to build his own team. I knew that many of the people that were in the team would go with me because I had been the only one working with them. So it just made sense for their perspective. The people that were working with me at that firm, many of them went with me. And so that was the team that I started with.
Yeah. And probably good you gave a year heads up. So, that's respect back to the place you were working at, because especially if you're going to be pulling people to start something,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a small community. As long as
Exactly.
everybody respects each other, you can then
Don't
lean
burn
in
any
and help.
bridges. And that's why we were just very transparent about it. And we hired new people. I trained them. I got them all going. And there were a couple of clients that we knew were going to come with me because it was just a very personal relationship. All that was discussed from the beginning. So it was sometimes you hear about, was it Gwyneth Paltrow who started the term the uncoupling? So we uncoupled for a year, and I'm really glad we did because, like you're saying, it's a very small community, and we're still really good friends because of that. And life's kind of too short for the drama that comes with people leaving, and giving like 2 weeks notice or things what they do.
Yeah. So what types of projects do you focus on in Studio K?
It's a mishmash of a lot. So in general, most like our expertise is in restaurants. And I became known in Chicago when I designed Girl on the Goat for Stephanie Izard. And Boca, really, I should say the Boca Group. And that then led to many other restaurants for well-known chefs. It's what I really enjoy most of creating something for a chef. That's still one of my favorite things to do in the world. Most difficult, but also the most rewarding when it all goes well. So that led to many larger restaurants, hotels, resorts. We do a tremendous amount of private residences, many times for those people that are our clients and then start building homes all over the world. I try to limit that because it's a lot of work and not necessarily my favorite. What else? We do a lot of work in the mountains. So currently we're doing a lot of work in Canada for some heli ski organizations and redoing a lot of these heli ski lodges. So yeah, a lot of lodges, a lot of mountain work, and resorts. I think that's kind of it, most of it. We're getting into the golf world a little bit. That's interesting.
The opposite season, once the skis are done, now they want to golf.
Yeah. And a lot of those resorts, they're kind of somewhere in areas where you can ski in the winter and golf in the summer. So that kind of overlaps. Some of everything. We're doing a food hall. On any given day, we're in average of 50 projects at the same time. So it's a wide range of experiences, which is really nice because it keeps us alert and it really works with the team because they would come and they say, "Oh, I really want to work on a restaurant now for a while," or we do a lot of student housing actually. So then it's good if you don't do the same thing for the same type of work every day.
Mm-hmm. It's able to mix it up a little bit.
Exactly.
So what's the hard part on doing restaurants? I've never done one.
Well, restaurants itself, I don't think are that hard because we've just done, hundreds at this point. Many times it's hard to do a restaurant for a chef, like a personal chef, like instead of working for a larger restaurant group, because it's almost like doing a private restaurant, right? It's hyper personal. Most time the chef has left a larger restaurant. They collect all of their money and that of their parents and that of their friends. And so there's a high level of risk because restaurants, cost millions. And so there's when it's a beginning chef, there's a lot of nervousness around that and a lot of second guessing, and they've never done it. So I have to kind of help them along in what's done and when you do it and how you do it. So that's just a very personal commitment of, about a year or two. And that comes with its challenges, like doing a private home comes with its challenges because it's so personal. The other side of it, because it's so personal, you're creating it together. And when that all goes well and the restaurant is then very popular, then that also creates a bond. Like many of my chef clients and I will call those our babies. And so it really feels like you're building like a family together. And the more restaurants you do together, the easier that gets and the more trust there is. And the easier it is for me to kind of get in their head. But it's still to this day, for me, the most rewarding thing that if one of these chefs walks in her or his restaurant, like, how did you know? This is exactly what I had in my head. And that's like, drop the mic kind of moment. And still so much more rewarding than if you've done something big for a large corporation and the CEO is happy. Just a different level of appreciation. And yeah, so I can't do 10 of those at the same time, but to always have one of those somewhere happening is very exciting and rewarding.
Yeah. And when you have the bigger ones, it's the chefs change. So, you know, when you create that space for them, it is a lot like a residence. If somebody's going to build their own and it not be through some cookie cutter housing plan, they're not planning on leaving that. This is their putting their stake in the ground, and a lot like a chef.
Exactly.
So have any of the chefs that did their own house have ridiculous kitchens at home?
You know what? I've never done a chef's home. I don't think they make enough money to build their own. I don't think chefs make that much money. I don't know. No, most of the time the houses that I'm doing are for the developers and big execs of big companies, and they fly around on their own plane and they build houses, in the mountains, by the sea. But it's never those restaurant people somehow.
Interesting. So I know you have 50 projects running at any one time. What's the size of your team now? Like, what was it when you started versus now?
We started with 5 and we're at 18. Somewhere before COVID, we were at almost 30. I realized due to COVID, but also kind of already before that's too large for me to still have oversight and still enjoy the design part of it and not only get lost in the management of running a company. So right around that 20 mark is I think for me an ideal spot to be. And it gives enough play that people can choose their projects and they can work together. But it's also not so large that you have the risk of becoming more corporate and business driven. I still it's my goal to always stay that studio with a studio environment and a lot of collaboration and everyone out there, in the big open room. And as soon as I felt losing that was definitely a time to readjust and bringing the team back to around that 20 mark.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for firm owners trying to find that sweet spot number that works for them?
Yeah, many people, like, I'm friendly with the owners of Avoco, a very big, super well-known firm. And he always said to me, once you're getting over that 25 number, then it's best to start a separate studio. So they have multiple studios in different towns. So I do think from everything that I've heard from other people, and I can only speak for me because I've only had this company, but that above that 25 number, it definitely gets harder to hit the same margins. Like it gets harder to oversee everything. And so many times your margins get much less at that point. So yeah, I guess advice for that, keep it lean and mean as much as you can, because it's very hard to build up a team and then or not have enough work or not have enough oversight. So I think in the beginning of my career, or at least of my company, I took a lot of pride in how big we were getting. And I was kind of getting into it bigger and better because you just react to what the outside world says. Oh my gosh, now you already have 10 people. And you're like, yeah. Oh, now already 15 people. And you see it kind of as a proof of success. And it took me definitely some time and some hard lessons to realize that the success definitely doesn't lay in the size of it. It's just on the output and how the team functions. So I would advise everyone to grow as slow as possible.
Yeah. And I guess figure out what is their, I don't want to say like guiding star, but I guess what's their goal? Because you started Studio K to focus on design. And it wasn't to be the largest firm in Chicago or anything.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. So I think whoever starts a company, most people would write a business plan, at least for the first 5 years, and really have this idea of like, hey, where do I want to be in 5 years? And that's something that we discuss with each of the team members every year. In their anniversary week, we always have like a little sit down, and one of the main questions is always, where do you want to be next year? So if you know that, and I think for a company, you cannot only look a year, you need to look about 5 years ahead in my mind. But having that idea of where you want to be definitely helps you making those day-to-day decisions and not just react to whatever client might knock on your door.
Yeah. Was there any difference on the clients you were picking or allowing in the door when you started versus now?
Yeah, absolutely. In the beginning, we were lucky that we started with some big ones. McDonald's was one of my clients. That I already met while at 555. They have what most people don't know, a large innovation division, which is an extremely interesting department. And it's all talking about the future of how people will eat fast casual or how they're going to behave in that space, which is a very interesting part of the design world for me, is the psychology that goes before design. To me, it's much more interesting than picking the colors or the furniture. So I was lucky enough to be asked to be part of that innovation department and work on the restaurants of the future. That client came along with me and ended up being a great client. That guy who hired me at that point is still actually a very close friend of mine, which is the best side effect of our job. So we meet so many people that end up somehow my neighbors or my friends or both. So in the beginning, I was really lucky that I had those kind of clients, but I also really wanted to put my mark on the restaurant space in Chicago itself. So I think in the beginning, our clients were smaller jobs, therefore smaller fees. A lot of work just because I wanted to do it. Even if they couldn't afford us, I would always somehow figure it out of how to do that. And now we still do that for very selective clients because they're friends of the company or I really admire them and I want to work with them. And so there's always kind of this idea like, well, the marketing budget will go to doing that for something that they couldn't really afford. But in general, I think our clients have become larger projects, larger scale, and a lot of repeat work. So our day-to-day, our bread and butter are all clients that we've had maybe for 10 years, all developers that are very successful, that keep developing with us by their sides. So it's hard for that very little space that there is left, if any, to then get new clients in. So we're very selective in who those new clients are. And most of that has to do with their MO, their, how they are. It's more about the people than about the type of work.
Yeah.
I think I've learned the hard way then. At the end of the day, I'd rather do a less interesting job for nicer people than a very interesting job for people who aren't kind, especially to the team. I kind of grew up old school, but a lot of the younger staff, I really want to protect them from some of the type of work and the people I had to work with in the beginning of my career. And I really, since we don't have to, we can steer away from. You never know because it's something like a first date and you think it goes well, and by date 3 you're like, So sometimes it's too late, or sometimes the client changes and all of a sudden a new manager shows up, so you don't always know. But as much as you can in the future with the interviewing, we take that interviewing process very serious and we see it as a two-sided interview. It's not us trying to get a job, it's us asking questions the other way around. And I ask around. I know a lot of people in our industry, obviously, so I ask around and see how those people are to work with. So we try to vet them as best as we can because we know most relationships that we make will last at least for a year. So it's an important decision to make because you will have to get along for a minimum of a year.
Yeah, because, it's the same thing as relationships. Like, you could be fine on that first and third date, but a year or two down the line, you're looking for a divorce and getting out.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's important for firms to be interviewing the client as much as the client's interviewing us. I know I've worked at one really small firm of 5 people, but I was an intern. So, not that much into how to pick clients, but any medium or large firm, you're going after an RFP and you're just fighting to win it. And then the client says it's yours. And there's not like that cross check of, hey, now that I've learned more about the project, I don't want to do it. You're almost signing a contract before you learn even more information or who exactly you're going to be working with within these large organizations.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson the very hard way. To get to know people, ideally meeting them face to face or in Zoom calls, but really get to know people before committing to that.
Yeah. Is there like one thing you look for or anything, or just trying to gauge personality?
Yeah, I think we're kind of leading the witness in a way where we are. We're now setting much longer timelines than we actually need because my main thing is let's under promise and over deliver. So people who call me and said that they're already late and they wanted to start already, but for whatever reason they called us too late. That's kind of a no-go from the beginning because I kind of feel like if you don't take responsibility for your timeline, then how do you expect us to do that? So part of it is with timing, where on purpose we make it seem way longer than it is and see how many people already fall off at that moment. And if they say, no, you have to do it in 12 weeks, and I know it's impossible, then that's kind of an easy separation there of picking the good from the bad. And same kind of goes for the creative part. Like as soon as we hear that they've already done a restaurant and they already have images and they also have a partner who has a furniture company, or like when it becomes one of those are things that we're very lucky that we don't have to do that anymore. And so our goal is to only work with clients where we feel we're going to design something that we want on the cover of our website. So for us, we need to have the excitement about it that we really want to work on it, meaning me and my partners, that all of us would be like excited to get on that job if we would have the time for it. So if we don't have that and we're already uninspired from the beginning, then that's an automatic no right away.
Yeah, because you just don't want to copy and paste somebody else's design.
Exactly.
No. But that's great advice for anyone looking as they're building and growing their firm and they start to have those opportunities where they can control what projects they allow in the door because they're not just trying to pay the bills anymore and they start getting those profits. So
yeah, and I have to say, I think you have that opportunity way sooner than you're aware of. And even till this day, I'm struggling with that. And we say yes to too many things because there's just too many cool projects and too many nice people, too many returning clients. So I'm definitely working on that boundary and how to get better in that. But one of my mentors keeps saying, don't see it as a no, because I'm very bad at saying no. So I have people around me that protect me, and I am not allowed to correspond directly with those maybe future clients. So they protect me from saying yes automatically because I get too excited too soon. So yeah, I build in a little bit of a buffer there. And I also think that, or I don't think that what my mentor said, which I'm now working on more, is the no, although it sounds like a no, it's actually not a no because it's a yes to something else. Mm-hmm. And so I'm focusing more and more on that yes to something else. and focus on what that something else is instead of focusing on whoever we're disappointing at that time.
Yeah, because you don't want to overload everybody and then not be able to keep up with the promises you're trying to keep.
Yeah.
So, and I know you mentioned keeping the business lean and mean to stay strong. Are you leveraging any AI tools to help with either the business or the design process with all the projects you guys are working on?
Yeah, in a very minimal way. We use it from a language, like on the marketing side, and some of the language part. I don't do that personally, but some people in my team do that. We've dabbled in it for one project very successfully from a visual, where instead of going and finding all these images on Pinterest, where a lot of our designers in the concept phase spend many hours on Pinterest to find the images to reference kind of our concept. And for one client, instead of doing that, we fed AI and created images ourselves just by our cues. Mm-hmm. So and for one particular project that worked extremely well, and a lot of those images were like, whoa, okay, let's do that. So it's almost like AI designed, and this is a nightclub in Miami, but designed the club. And we're like, yeah, that looks dope. Let's do that. So it's really interesting because you're kind of starting copying an AI image to then that still takes a year to actually get that to something that actually works. But that really worked well. And for some reason, because it was a nightclub and it's everything really sleek and most is about LEDs. And so I think I was extremely excited. I'm like, oh, we should do this from now on. Like, you don't have to go on Pinterest anymore. But then we were working on some stuff in the mountains in Canada and try to do that. But when you're then in real spaces or restaurants, that becomes a whole lot harder. So that hasn't worked as much. I think that it can really work. And at some point, my dream is to have a full-time AI person in our office to just do that and create those images. So yeah, at some point that would be great. We just haven't had the time really to dive into that. But I do think it is in the future, or it's now, and it will be much more. And I don't want to go against it, but figure out a way to go along it. And I'm never afraid of those kind of new tools because I feel like at the end of the day, it still needs creatives. It still needs more than what a computer can generate like that. So I think as long as you can use it in your advantage, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I find it as another search tool because if you're already searching on Pinterest, you're already searching on Google and looking for inspiration, like it's just another way to do it, but it's going to pull up things that don't exist necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you ever tried to, I'm just curious if you've ever done, since, you started in fashion and sometimes use that as an inspiration, if you've ever tried to do any cues on, hey, this is the inspirational photo or what you're looking for. And
that's a great idea, though.
I don't know if it would come up with anything weird.
At some point, I'm going to take a sabbatical for like 6 months and do that. That'd be so fun. No, it's just, I just never allows for that kind of play. I would love to. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It could be a good weekend project.
Yeah, I know people have tried putting in like, hey, create a head detail of something, and it literally puts a person's head. And so it doesn't really think of it that way, but
yeah. I've seen on Instagram many funny images of like beds that become dog beds and dogs sleeping on their bed. So yeah, but again, like I've worked with a guy who does this for a living, and it's a skill like anything else. You need to get skilled in it. You need to spend the time on doing it, and when running a company, that's not necessarily. My schedule doesn't allow for that right now.
Yeah.
Would love to do that at some point.
No, but exciting to see just how you guys are starting to dabble with it. And also understanding when it's not working. It's all right, pivot and do what we've been doing. And
I think over time there will be so many changes in that anyway. Mm-hmm. Kind of, I feel if you think in the beginning of what we messed around with on the internet, this will go so fast, so different. Like a year from now, that landscape will look so different already.
Yeah, definitely. And have there been any organizations that have left an impact on your career or Studio K?
So many. It's so hard. I don't know exactly what you mean with organization, but we have so many collaborators, right? The one thing, if I learned anything, I learned that none of what we do, we can do alone. It's impossible. So we're very dependent on amazing tradespeople. Like we have Antonio Pinto, who does all of our Italian plaster on every project, flies all over the country and puts the Italian plaster on anything that we want, which is on most things. So his company has been kind of our steady collaborator, same as like our furniture makers. And these people who will never see, they'll never be published, they're never there, but they're in our office every day, coming with prototypes and helping us design our custom furniture. So I think if you say like what are the organizations, it's I think our collaborators and vendors. And at the same time, many of my clients, like I've learned so much from Core Spaces, who's one of my largest clients who we do all the student housing for, and have been grateful to watch them grow as fast as they did. And, I always look at how they do things and how I can learn from that. Same as with Sterling Bay, one hell of a partner of ours who we do crazy amount of projects for. So watching them, kind of like the big guys and how they do it. And many times when someone calls me or I don't feel good about something, I call them. I'm like, hey, what do you think? Does this seem good, or is this legit or not? So they're just great mentors of mine. And like I said earlier, 555, the company where I literally got my shot with no experience pretty much to speak of. And they gave me an opportunity to build that studio. And it was a tough road and a wobbly one. But yeah, without them, my company would have never been anything. So yeah, I don't know if I said enough, but so it's kind of like without them, us in an island is nothing. Like we're just people who put pretty images together. But at the end of the day, it needs to turn into a real space. So same counts for great architects we work with, amazing general contractors, lighting designers. So I just love the collectiveness of it. And there's nothing that I enjoy more than creating with peers. Like those are my favorite moments. Actually, right after this, I told you I had a meeting right after this, and I have to run over to Sterling Bay for a huge project we're doing out west, and we're having a big design charrette with one of our favorite landscape architects in the West Coast. And so yeah, that's my evening. We're gonna hang and charrette a large property. So that to me is my favorite time, that working with other people that are on top of their game and learning from them and understanding more about the fields that surround us. Every week I'm like, I want to be a landscape architect. I want to be an architect. I should be a lighting designer. Because all those fields right around us are so interesting, and I would love to learn so much more about all those adjacent fields. So, yeah, I guess all of our collaborators.
Yeah, it's all those partnerships, because I know some people have said they don't want to open up their own firm is because they like collaborating with others. And I'm like, well, it's just different type of collaboration. They're not in-house, but hey, if they're stopping in every week, it's almost going to feel like they're in-house.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Building those relationships, because then you keep using those partners on all your projects. So
yeah,
I think it's very similar, and great advice for anybody just looking to make connections and find those partners as they start their firm.
Yeah, and find the partners like what I love again with so many of them. Like over time you work, you travel together, you cannot but become friends. So it's not just what they then do, but it's just, they see my son grow up, they see their kids grow up. Like in the weekend, I'm texting with many of them, like everyone who's now becoming an empty nester and their kids are going off to school. So that past even what we do on a day-to-day. If you work long enough with people, it just becomes way more than just work, and it's just part of a community.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
So what my favorite, which I've told many, many people, including my younger family members, and it's not just for interior design, I think it's for any professional in their career, is I see kind of life in these pockets, like 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50. And it's, take that with a grain of salt, but it's just kind of like an era of like what you're doing at that time. And my advice to everyone is in that first period, when you're going to school or you just came out of school, those first 10 years, I see it as that game that's called Connect the Dots. You sit in the back of the car when you're little and you go on vacation and they give you one of the coloring book to keep you quiet for a while. You connect those dots. And I always say in those years between 20 and 30, just put dots. Don't worry. Don't worry about what the dots are, where they are. Just put dots, as many as possible. And what I mean with that is just take a job. It's not perfect, and it will not be perfect, because actually there is no perfect job as far as I'm aware. But just take it and do it. And the only place where you're not going to find it is in your room, right? So go out, take that, shitty library job, or, go babysitting or stand at Starbucks. It doesn't matter. It's about doing, and it's about putting dots. Go to the cocktail receptions. Go on that marathon. Go on a boat with vendors. Whatever it might be, go out there and meet people and do things. Because over time, and in my mind, kind of between 30 and 40, you start connecting those dots. And then right around 40, in that kind of time frame, you'll go like, it's a giraffe. And then it's really fun, because then you can just start embellishing the giraffe. You just have to finish the giraffe, and then you can make him cool, and you can give the giraffe rain boots if you want to. But so that, to me, for the young people, is just trust the process and take your time. Because currently, because of probably how younger kids are raised and the constant instant gratification with cell phones and everything that comes with it, there's this like hurry. And this is like, after 1 year, they ask me if they can get a promotion. And then they're like, but if you get a promotion every year, that's physically impossible. So it's like there's so much rush in getting somewhere, which I'm not 100% sure if they know where that somewhere is. But there isn't somewhere better. It's just growth and learning more and expanding your horizons and everything that you know and everyone that you know. And so taking your time and actually enjoying the putting up the dots on the page, as many as you can, because there's more to then connect when you're around at 38, or when, I'm not saying you have to wait till 30, you could have them at 28, but just start putting those dots. Don't think about it too much. Don't think about what kind of dots. Do it a lot, and then trust the process that they will start connecting, and at some point you'll recognize what that game is, which just allows you to lean into that time a little bit more and actually enjoy it. Because one of my favorite people in the world, who runs my retreats and is a great mentor and kind of coach to me, he says, remember, these are the good old days. And you forget that, because you think there's something better you're going to, but when you're there, you're going to look back at that time and you're like, wow, that was cool in that first year when I did this, or that second year when we did that. And he advised that to me when I first started my company. And when we were cursing at some IKEA tables we had to assemble, because, it's the only way for us to have a desk. And he's like, just remember, these are the good old days. And it's absolutely true. I look back to those first months with snowstorms and just the 5 of us in a building that was way too big. And we were nervous, and we didn't know if we were ever going to get those clients to afford that building and that IKEA desk. But with the stress that came, there was also this feeling of we're in the beginning of something really interesting. And I would give a lot to sometimes go back to those first few months.
Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy with the dots. Like, as you were explaining, I was just kind of reflecting back on my career, and I'm in my 30s, and I definitely feel like I'm starting to connect the dots. I don't know if it's a giraffe or what yet, but
yeah, but they're connecting. It's going to be something.
But it's definitely different than when I was in my 20s, that I'm just taking shots at the dark, and who knows what's going to stick or what you experience, what you don't want to experience anymore. So, no, that's fantastic.
And sometimes you don't see it till later. Like, I look back now and certain things that happened, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why that dot connected with that. But I had no idea, because at that point it was just a random, seemingly random something, whatever happened, whoever I met or whoever I got in contact with. And then later on you look back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that number 2 led to number 3, and that's why that turned into number 4. But you would have no idea at number, because with that game they make on purpose, make you go weird shapes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my advice for young people, to just take it and do it, do more and think less about it. And there doesn't have to be that much anxiety about what's next.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. But if anybody has any questions or wants to work with Studio K, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Go on our website. There's an email there to fill out, and it will make its way to myself or any of my business partners.
Great. I will put your website in the show notes, so it makes it real easy for anybody to find you. But Karen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you. It was a blast.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.